Hello, and welcome to the NOTstalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week, we have a special guest on the podcast, Jay Levy. Welcome to NOTstalgia. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, and thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talk to y'all. And yeah, I've done a lot of great prep work. I'm really writing that balance of, I wanted to be respectful of this very professional environment, but also bring that Jay Levy vibe.
Oh, yeah.
So all my notes are on a legal pad.
Ooh.
The legal pad
Damn,
also
okay.
has some glitter on it. I feel it. There's a slight shimmer from where I pulled it from.
So it's a good mix.
Yeah, right on the line.
Throwing in a bit of legalese, I hope.
I mean, in the true spirit of the producers, just make it gay, right?
Make it, yeah.
But keep it gay. Oh boy, there's so much to talk about.
Speaking of, that's the property that we watched this week. We watched the 60s Mel Brooks producers and the 2005 remake of the producers, and there's a lot to talk about. Yeah.
I also like that it's another kind of like Hairspray moment, just in terms of the way it got remade, where it was like acclaimed movie musical, then movie musical. I mean, obviously there were more iterations of it, but like in this very specific, I love that. I think that's so fun because it is kind of it's not a sludge just as far as watching kind of the same story a second time. It's like, oh, this is kind of a brand new spin on this other thing with like new scenes and new dialogue and new sort of like pratfalls and fun little bits. Like it felt like a nice reimagining because the songs.
It's kind of funny that it went from being a movie about a Broadway production to being a Broadway production of the movie about the Broadway production to then becoming it's fun.
It is fun.
What a fun little thing.
And if I remember correctly, they kind of came out around the same time as they were doing a lot of movie versions of musicals, in that like there was that Broadway boom. Right? Like Broadway's always been a thing, and they were taking musicals and turning them into movies back in since like Singing in the Rain. I mean, you can go all the way back.
Spider-Man the musical.
Oh yeah.
But turning movies, and because like Mel Brooks did it a few times, didn't he? Did Young Frankenstein?
Musical, yeah.
Right? I mean, it was pretty cool. I think I enjoyed watching this one a little bit more than watching Hairspray, but that's also I'm jilted.
100% there with you. We have opinions on Hairspray.
We do. I mean, I'm in the other category where I personally like Hairspray more than I like the producers, but that's just an aesthetic choice. Like as a musical lover or as somebody who likes musicals, I'm like way more of a Hairspray queen than a producer stan. If that makes sense.
I get that. And I will say I've done some of my research here and I've listened to some episodes, and I know we don't do gatekeeper stuff, and I am not a big fan of that either. But I'm a lover of the tidbits and the little nuggets and the little things. Oh, yeah. And I think it's because I hyper focus on those. So I'm excited to share a couple little things that I enjoy about these two versions, especially this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into everything, so my relationship with the producers is, I think I saw the 2005 version once, but I just remember one of my exes, his best friend, really, 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 really loved the producers. And that's basically, he also just really, really loved Mel Brooks. And that's basically like, I didn't remember shit about this. Like I didn't remember, like, of course, Springtime for Hitler, but I didn't remember, the writer of the production. Wow. Okay. Like there's a lot of things that I did not remember. So watching this, I felt like I felt like it was all brand new, basically.
Oh yeah.
Eric, what did you...
I mean, for me, I knew almost nothing about the producers going into this, apart from Nathan Lane being one of the leads in the sort of remake of the musical. But again, that's just because, like I was saying earlier, I'm obsessed with Nathan Lane. I think anything he's ever been in, he's gold. I literally couldn't stop listening to the Addams Family movie or the Addams Family musical cast album when I was in high school. Like even just that, like that was like a really big thing. And then like he's been in literally pop cultural ephemera of my entire like upbringing. He's been in almost everything, and it's always been like Nathan Lane. But I'd never seen the first one or the musical, so this was like a first complete fresh set of eyes, no history with it at all. So I'm coming at it from a very, very fresh, surface level, untethered perspective.
I'm excited because that's the complete opposite for Jay.
Yes.
Oh, I've seen this once or twice. I may have. So my background, two of my brothers are music performers in New York. They both went to a school for musical theater. They both went through the same program. One of them is about to graduate from that program right now. And so shout out my brother Nathan. Nathan and Adam. So Nathan is actually the understudy for Evan Hansen for Dear Evan Hansen right now.
Oh shit! Really?
Broadway.
No shit.
Yeah.
Hell yeah!
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And my brother Adam is just has been a part of a bunch of different. He was in the touring production of Waitress, and he also is now in the new touring production of the Disney. It was called the Disney Princess Party. They just announced that it's now an official Disney licensed product, and so Disney's putting them on tour with that. And it's basically all the Broadway princes and princesses. But musicals have been a part of my family for a long, long time. Like, it was always kind of funny. My stepdad tells a story about like how he was kind of excited, like he would come over and me and my brother, like he's like, oh, well, I'm gonna rent movies for you and your brother to watch. And like my mom is getting us ready for movie night, and it's who wants to watch West Side Story, and we're like, yeah. And he's like, I never saw anybody freak out, like two young kids freak out to watch West Side Story, and knew all the songs and knew all the things. So my family and I we saw the musical when it was on tour, loved it, like, you know, and it's been hard for me. Well, not hard, but different for me to start like, I'm reconciling with like things that I love from my younger age, looking at it through a critical lens now, and understanding like where my line is for what I will enjoy still or what I can't. And so it was kind of interesting to watch it with a critical eye for the first time, like really critical. So I'm excited to hear what y'all thought, though, especially because I was also hoping that y'all would kind of feed me so I could know where to swerve.
Oh, don't worry. I mean, we are steering the ship and also willing to go to port whenever you want to stop and get off.
I'm sure you've listened. This is very much, especially on our end, a pulling no punches when it comes to like, oh, I thought that was trash or like whatever. So it's going to be great. Regardless,
also,
it's going to be fun.
On that note of like being like trying to reconcile things that you really loved or still hold a place for in your heart, like even after looking at something or finding new context for like maybe some of the methods that were used during production or some of the things that like, you know, the story is saying underneath it all. Like, I mean, something could be trash and you could still like it. You know, like that's kind of like we're trying to find out is like what is that line? And we have to face that, you know? So I'm so stoked to get into this. Should we just do it?
Yeah, let's
cool.
Jump in. Amidst a cavalcade of monetary romances, Max Bialystock is schmoozing and smooching his way through New York's 60 over 60 to help fund his next big Broadway smash that may or may not get made. In walks accountant and general do-gooder Leopold Leo Bloom, who informs Max that his last show cost less than the money invested, and that if he were to hypothetically commit the same act of fraudulence on a much larger scale, they could be millionaires faster than a 15-minute intermission. The plan is set. They'll find the worst show in history to be produced by the worst director in town, as they promise investors it'll be the smash hit of the season, and when it inevitably fails, they'll be rich. What's the worst show in history, you may ask? How about a dramatic pro-Nazi propaganda piece that deifies Adolf Hitler? Yikes.
Who's the worst director in town? No one other than Roger Debris, the town-renowned failure whose, big air quotes, sassy and fruitful direction is as lousy as his limp wrists. They hire the actors, stage the play, hire a sex object, a Swedish assistant, and it's opening night. Just as the audience's appalled thresholds are reached, a big air quotes eccentric and peculiar Adolf Hitler steps into the stage and has the audience in his stitches. The play is a hit. Now, since they can't pay back the 1,000% investment to the stakeholders, it's off to jail they go. They stage a musical with inmates at the state penitentiary and hatch an equally lascivious scheme with the prisoners, but at the end of the day, that's showbiz, baby.
Ooh!
Lascivious is the volcano that killed Pompeii, right?
Yes, 100%.
See, I did learn something. History.
You guys are so smart. I was like, this fucking big ass word. I stumbled over that shit. Okay.
I love the word lascivious just because it's like kind of snaky and like like a little bit gross and like ooh, lascivious. Like it's kind
also just pretentious as fuck.
Yes, thank you so much. I 100%. I love it.
But it's the kind of word that sounds the way you feel when you say it.
Yes.
Lascivious. You feel it as you say it, even if I have no idea what it means.
You feel it in your bones. Absolutely. Okay, let's just fucking rage. Jump in. So off the bat, on my end, I'm gonna just full say I didn't like this one. Just as a blanket statement. And I think the pacing was a little bit rough for me, just because I feel like it like kind of languished a little bit in a lot of ways. I don't know. But this is also, again, I'm coming from a place where like I'm not completely familiar with the Mel Brooks sensibility. And I know that this is obviously like one of his staples, just as far as like the sort of slapstick humor, the sort of the heightened hysterics of like comedy that obviously Gene Wilder is a master of, and portrays in most of the things that he's been in. And that has a lot to do with Mel Brooks's comedy. But even within that, I still, for some reason, really struggled. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Personally, I also kind of felt the same way. I do think that I had seen this at some point, but like, I enjoy Mel Brooks. I love Gene Wilder, but to me, it took me a minute to get into it just because it was just fucking straight in and there wasn't a lot of context, especially where the next one they do. I feel like it did a little bit of a better job of setting up the world before just jumping in. But yeah, it took me a minute. And I think one of my issues was with Gene Wilder and how I felt like they were trying to make his character have like some sort of OCD or some sort of mental health issue. Oh. And for me as a person that has OCD, you know, like he's like compulsion, and he needs the blanket and stuff. And I'm like, I was kind of turned off by that, you know, like at least in those moments when they leaned on that for comedy, because it was always in comedy and it was never necessarily something that played throughout the whole film, right? It was just only in those moments as a joke, as like an easy return, you know? So for me, that was a little bit rough.
Yeah, to piggyback on that a little bit, I agree. I think because tonally, I feel like I want to compare it to like the musical version a little bit, just in terms of like joke punch up, because in the first one, I do know that like a lot of those hysterics obviously like were a little bit messy and problematic. Just in terms of like, oh, it's funny that he's having a panic attack, or like people who stress and panic shouldn't be taken seriously. That's kind of like the joke, like, oh, this is hilarious because it's not real, but
or they're
you
lesser
know what I mean?
Than.
They're less,
because he is being taken advantage of by Max, right?
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the humor relied, well, not all of it, but like some of it in these specific moments, like with the blanket or with I'm hysterical or the you're fat, so big, fat, wet, fat, fatty, whatever. Like, I'm like, okay, sure, but like, is the joke he's having a panic attack and is also like fat? Like, I just don't really understand the context within that. Whereas in the other one, they still had those moments, which again is basing it on the initial work. But I felt like there was a lot more like really intelligent punch-up jokes in there that like the first one just didn't really have. Like, I felt like it really just emphasized fucking solid jokes in the other one, but this one I felt like it was kind of empty with those.
Well, I just think it's funny too. It's interesting because I think I saw the musical movie first, then I went back and watched the original because I had already enjoyed so much of Mel Brooks's work and Gene Wilder's work specifically too. So I went back and rewatched it. So I watched it through the lens of seeing the musical and then having to see this as like the original work. And so I think that I enjoyed it for it being different. I enjoyed that. And I love a good overture. I love credits before the movie begins, or in that cut, like the cutting. This is, 67. This is Mel Brooks's this is a directorial debut. So this is actually the first in those movies. So he's really still finding his voice. But what I think, so if I kind of approach it as a fan of Mel Brooks, where I'm like, this is an interesting look at kind of where he started. You can kind of see what sticks through his movies as he progresses and what sort of things kind of got worse or better. So it is intriguing rewatching it in this context too, because I do think it's sort of, I don't know, I feel like taking into account the time period and knowing some of his other works, it was easier for me to, like, I don't know, not explain away, but like understanding, oh, well, Mel Brooks is into visual, like having a visual representative of these things. And even if it's like, but what is that? I always go back to who's it making fun of, or who's the joke at, like the punchline, who is the punchline? And those are the pieces that can be problematic sometimes, but it's difficult with Mel Brooks's work because it's like, he takes similarly like to the South Park-y kind of vibe, which is, I don't entirely enjoy that humor, but like, we just make fun of everybody equally, and we just kind of make fun of the situations and all those things. And so there are moments that I enjoy that Mel Brooks did. Like, he has a lot of firsts as a director with like bringing things to film for the first time or pushing those boundaries. But it's like, sometimes is it for who's the humor at the expense of?
Yeah, that's honestly you saying it has a very sort of South Park sensibility in that we're making fun of literally everything. It's equal opportunity offense. That's the kind of vibe. That's the presentation. That's the platform. But with that, like, that approach to me is so, and I mean, again, it like, this was what, 60 years ago at this point, or 50 years ago rather.
Oh my God.
Isn't that wild? Like, this is a 50-year-old film. With that in mind, though, like, maybe it's just because of where I am at in time and space and like my age and how I've grown up and what I've seen. It seems like the easiest approach to comedy to not have any opinion at all. And that, I think that was like one of the biggest off-putting things, because to me, I also understand Mel Brooks's background as a Jewish person, and so there's sort of like the acknowledgement of like ridiculing Nazism and sort of that kind of big level bigotry, especially at the time in the 60s when the war wasn't that old. Like, I mean, relatively speaking, but it was still pretty recent, pretty fresh. But it's like, I felt like in this, specifically with that, the only way to get rid of the facade, or not necessarily the facade, but like the bigness of evil that was that time period, is to punch down at queer people. Like, let's make the Nazis look bad by making them worse, which is making them gay. And you're like, oh, well, okay, well, like, the only thing worse than being a Nazi, I guess, is being femme. I don't understand. You know what I mean? That was like one of the bigger concerns I had with even, and I will say, I think the next one made it worse.
Yes.
And like, I think that this one did a decent job at being like, oh, femme, queer, whatever. But in the next one, they really heightened the, not only the gayness of it, but the, and the gayness that it should be bad and should be perceived as badness. It was just heightened.
They doubled down. It got worse. My note literally says, is it possible that the second is more problematic than the original? Like,
and that's honestly one of the things too, is I thought very similarly, this could be a little bit worse as far as its tone. I mean, granted, I thought it was more entertaining because of the songs, but outside of that, 100%. That was my big thing, was the, like, what's worse than a Nazi? A queer. I was like, oh, fuck. Like, that's kind of the predicated comedy umbrella for the entire movie.
While at the same time, like, kind of coding Max and Leo as queer themselves, right? Especially the end, like, their little monologues for each other and stuff like that. And, like, it's so weird thinking about it, because, like, I didn't have that context that you were talking about with Mel Brooks, where he... To me, okay, cool. Let's pull back a little bit. Like, this Jewish director decides that these producers are going to make the worst thing in history for fun, and as they're duping everybody, right? Which is a play reframing Hitler as fun and gay. But of course people love it, because at first they're like, oh no, Hitler is bad. But then you change the narrative surrounding this awful, horrible, inhumane person, and then suddenly it's fine and everybody loves it, you know? And to me, like, I just wrote this big fucking giant piece on Beauty and the Beast and how that reframes chivalry and cyclical abuse and male violence into something that you should want and that is good. And I feel like this kind of, on a meta level, is like, hey, if you reframe something, people are going to like it, even though they shouldn't, you know, like, like, kind of, what is your role in media? And if you think this is going to be reframed, of course, rich white people like Hitler, you know, of course, like, you know, when you take out, like, that badness, suddenly everything is doable and it's okay, you know? So, like,
100%. Yeah. There's a level of, like, especially if that's the kind of the connotation or the approach they're going to take when it's like exemplifying this and kind of making a commentary on like, oh, well, this is just general population, and that general population does hate queer people, and that's why this is funny. If that is the intended commentary or the intended voice, I do think there needs to be a bit more of like a foundation of this was intentional. This like we really did this thing, not like a couple gay jokes and then it's this and then it's like, well, see, that's just the people, and it's like, well, it's not. You wrote that into the script. That's your choice to, you know what I mean?
And they chose to do Hitler rather than cockroaches, right? So
yeah.
Like gay Hitler is worse than a cockroach, right? And then like within that too, it's like they're giving a voice to this story and this creator that is literally, they are empowering a literal neo-Nazi, telling him that they love his ideas and that the people need to hear this, you know? And to me, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is absolutely Hollywood. Like, Joker, fuck off, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so I appreciate the meta-ness of this narrative a lot. But yeah, it really does hate queer people.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when I think about it too, and I don't know, I guess I don't know, I can't tell exactly why I maybe have a different point of view on that part of it, or like understanding it. Because like for me, when I was viewing it, when I see it, especially because I had seen the musical version first, and understanding the sort of like over the top campiness of Broadway, and that sort of like some of those tropes of like what Broadway is or who it is for, right? Like you know, it's definitely there's coding there, and I guess I kind of saw it as more campy, and I actually enjoyed the fact that when I watched the original one verse after seeing the musical, I love that they didn't just take Roger and throw him into the role of Hitler, the director, right? Like, which was definitely a problematic representation, but they made him a hippie. Like they took the LSD, like making Hitler a hippie was like the joke for all these folks. Yeah. And I can't tell if like part of it too, like when I was like watching it or when I was thinking about it in terms of like, what's the commentary here? Because Mel Brooks is always there is subtext. And I feel like with some of his other works, not necessarily, I can't tell if it's like that equal opportunity offensive, or if it's like he is saying certain things and he's making fun of a lot of times, like in Blazing Saddles and all that. Like, yes, it was problematic, and it's definitely, there's a lot of aspects to it that are difficult, but like, who was the joke? Who were the fools? It was the racist white people. And whether or not that's like the okay version, I feel like here it's like, look at all these affluent theater folk. We literally put the worst thing you could imagine onto a stage, and they're eating it up because of, you know, whatever it is. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it's just very hard for me sometimes to figure out the line of where's the joke at, or like, who is the joke on, or is it on everybody? Like, is the whole world, like the whole universe that it's created? I don't know.
And see, that to me, I'm like, yes, if that is the way that you explained it, yes. If that's the context, I'm like, 100%, give it to me. I love it. I love that commentary. I'm into it. But I think from a viewer's perspective, especially not really having much of that history, it didn't read that first time. And I wanted it to, because I'm like, well, if that's the intent, then I totally get it. And I think that that's great. But like, kind of coupling with these characters and seeing the way that, like, I don't know, I guess it is kind of a commentary again on production and on like kind of selling your soul for literally anything. And it's like all schemes, it's all scams, it's all fake, it's all
capitalist.
It's all capitalist. Like, we'll do whatever the fuck we need to do to make this happen. And we have no stake in the game. We have no ethos. Like, that's just, it's done. We're done. But I wish that it had more. I mean, I guess I'm always on this podcast being like, it doesn't, like, too much exposition is bad, but not enough exposition is also bad. But I feel like in this case, maybe just a little bit more of like a, hey, this is a commentary on consumption and on white consumption and on what sells, and like, like that's the joke. Because it felt messy because it wasn't specific.
And I wonder if part of that is like what, like we were talking about, where it is kind of like a product of the times, where like in this time you couldn't necessarily be as overt, maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but like just having like an extra 5 minutes in the movie, like setting that up at some point, like, you know, and like sprinkled throughout, like it could be a minute here and a minute here or whatever, you know, like that kind of stuff I think could have really elevated this on my first watch. You know what I mean?
And as I'm again now looking through it critically after like watching it for a lot of times just out of enjoyment and like also as part of like just growing up. Gene Wilder has been such a huge, and as a Jewish person, it's like Mel Brooks, like I don't know, there's a point there, and I try to, like, my brain does sometimes go, when I look at the intersections of all my identities, right? And like where are my lines, like what am I okay with because of who that person is versus what am I not with? So It brings up a lot, but I will say, at least, like, it's sort of like my brain went to, well, there's not a whole lot of racial diversity in the film, but maybe that's better because there's not negative racial like the visual represent, like in a negative way for the time period of in 1967, except for that on the jury at the end, there were 2 people of color. There wasn't a single person of color or a woman on the jury in the 2005 version. So it's like, it got really, you know what I mean? Not to jump ahead, but it's very, message, it's all over the place.
It is all over the place. Yeah.
I think the racism was more directed at white people, right? It was directed at Germans and at the concierge woman, like, who's like got the bad accent and is like racist and like, I inherited this job, with like her curlers in her hair and stuff like that. But I think it was more, even those things weren't substantive enough to really, they were like one-liners, or like the equivalent of one-liners for a punchline. You know what I mean?
Mel Brooks is all about like caricatures too, and that's, I think, part of it is it's just the caricatures of different people and different things. And this one, I think, is like mostly joking about New York and like like in that sort of like New York and theater, the theater industry and the business. And I really, it's hard for me to like think about it in that time period as much, like, other than just Mel Brooks is hard. It's just a hard one for me to read, and I've never had to think about it critically. I really wish that I want to do more research on what that was like critically. Like, I don't think this movie went over well critically. I saw that, but it did end up having a cult following and then kind of came back. But what were people viewing, or his thoughts? Was he like seen as a director in this time period for like the stories that he was telling, or the people that he was showing on in these things? Was he seen as being out there for the time period and like pushing the boundaries then? I don't know.
These characters all felt like caricatures, like there wasn't a lot of substance to them, maybe other than maybe some substance to Max and Leo. But other than that, I mean, everybody was just a one-liner. You have Ula, who literally, okay. So the thing about Ula in this one, right? I mean, girl knows what she's after. She's after money, and she's down to fuck to get it, right?
Yeah.
So, like, part of me was like, hell yeah, girl, fucking get that, right? Because she's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this. Like, but at the same time, she just, like, she was never a person or never anything in this. Like, she's just like, oh, you want to fuck? We're going to go to the hotel? Like, okay, cool. But, like, then, like, my favorite image of Ula is, like, her with the fucking typewriter and with the bottle of champagne on ice typing 1 letter a minute while she's fucking sipping. I'm obsessed with that, and I love that. But I just wish she didn't have to fuck anybody. Like, fuck that gross old man.
Well, yeah, I think I just struggle because, yes, there is a sort of a commentary on, like, autonomy, and, like, obviously she's capable in this capacity. At least in this one, way less so, I think, than the Uma Thurman performance in the next one. But I know the joke is supposed to be boy dumb, girl hot, I want sex. Like, that's kind of, like, just base level. That's, like, she's doing the Fosse, her boobs, like, that's the whole bit, like, that's the vibe. But is it a joke? Like, I know it's supposed to be like humorous. It's humor-ish. Humor-ish, yeah. And that to me, I'm just like, I don't necessarily understand her role in this, apart from, again, just the clear and very specific objectification of her character. That's why she's there. She's like, we're rich now, we're gonna be rich. Let's, like, buy this lady as a sex object and to just stare at, like, gorgeous. That's why we're doing it. But then there wasn't really much like there isn't really a turn on that at all. It just kind of, it's very stasis. It stays exactly where it was introduced, and that's the end of the story for her character. Where in my head, I was, like, really hoping that, like, the commentary would be at the end of it, when they don't get the money, her accent disappears. She's like, well, fuck this, I'm out. Like, bye.
Like, something, right?
Gorgeous.
Like, some
that
sort
would be
of justice.
it would be so fun to be like, oh yeah, like we assumed she was like capable and obviously like get yours, you're doing it, go for it. But then having like a very finite like, oh yeah, 100%. This is a movie about schemes. She's playing them like they're playing the system. Like
Exactly.
gorgeous. You know what I mean? I mean, and again, I'm not trying to be here being like trying to punch up a Mel Brooks script. You know what I mean? Like, as I don't want to come just be like, actually, if I was in the room, like a lot would have changed. Like, I think that's very silly. Sorry, very silly. But it just felt like there wasn't a payoff with a lot of it, and her character specifically, because it felt like there was some intended commentary, but we never really were explicitly told like, hey, yeah, that's what we were trying to say with this. It was kind of like, maybe.
I think that's exactly the problem that we were talking about earlier, where there was this hint of this is what this is supposed to be and this is what this character is supposed to represent, but there wasn't that like extra minute of screen time that we needed to like fully make that come around. So instead there was just like a lot of ideas that are kind of like loose threads, and you really have to watch this with a critical eye to get like, you know, the actual commentary that is happening in this, you know, which again, like Jay was saying, that could have been because this is his first piece, you know, all of that.
Yeah.
But like the women in this, like, specifically, like, just no matter what fucking age, were just incredibly sexualized. So, like, you know, I love the cyclical conning. I love that the young con the middle-aged, who con the old, who know that they're being conned and don't care because they just want to get fucked. You know, like, I'm good with that, right? But, like, women are, like, objectified to the point to where, you know, other than Ula, they don't even have names, right? Literally, like, the names of these women in both this film and the remake is Hold Me, Touch Me. And, like, it's literally, like, the actions. So, like, they're objectified in a way that is directly related to sexual relations, you know? So, like, this is exactly what they are. But I also liked that all of those old women beat the shit out of him, or like just like fucking took it. They're like, look, you're gonna get my money, like, oh, you fucking sissy. Like, you know, they're like demasculating him at every point and like not giving him an inch. So like, and you know, even at the end, like they have that, like they're like, yeah, no, we know what this is, it's fine, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I liked that because then, like, you know, that felt less scummy to me, and it felt like those women still had agency in that choice, you know.
That as an opening scene, I was so taken, obsessed. That like first, like the pictures, like, okay, which one is she? Perfect. Because again, like you said, agency and autonomy played the biggest role in that, where he's getting something, she's getting something. It is a mutual interaction. We know what's happening.
And that was explicitly said at the end, right? Like that, like just that one line of like, you know, them being like, yeah, we know what this is. It's fine. Like he didn't fuck us over, right? So if we had like just a line like that with those other loose threads, gorgeous. Yeah.
And that is like, I didn't realize some of those moments, and it kind of, after hearing both of you speak on it too, it makes sense to me that I feel this way with a lot of his films. He will just present something and you have these moments of like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But then there's no commentary and there's so much space for you to put in your own thing, and that's the problematic piece of it. It's sort of like, hey, like Madeline Kahn in Blazing Saddles, when she's like kicking that cowboy off the stage and like punching him over and like performing for them in like a, you know, in this Wild West like sort of vibe. She's like got a lot of agency, but then it's just like at the end of the day, it's just like she's still just a sex object. She's just objectified. Ula was he took a wad of cash. Max took a wad of cash and said, I'm gonna go buy a toy. I done a lot of work. I fucked a lot of ladies, and I want to buy a toy. And then Ula is there, and you're like, oh, so, and that is almost, I feel like before we jump to the new one, that's somewhat consistent in amongst his representation of women. And I will say that his representation of women in this story in particular are very problematic. And it's definitely all just male gaze and objectification.
Literally, you saying that, like you said it best. Literally, like that idea of like starting the paragraph and then not finishing it, it's kind of just like, well, that, and to me, again, commenting back on like this idea of like, well, anything's fair game, equal opportunity jokes, that being the like kind of like the laziest and safest unfunny choice. In the same way, starting the conversation but then never actually telling us where you stand in this really kind of trashy centrist perspective is kind of like, Okay, well, like, what you said, nothing's happened. Like, we know you're capable of commentary. We know you're capable. It's in the script. Like, it's in the work. You've already done it on certain things. But then not completing that idea with all of these, because again, you're bringing up some interesting topics. You're bringing up some interesting ideas, but not giving the same sort of credibility or like leeway to those ideas in the way that you've done with this other one makes it seem like you're on the side of the bad thing and not the critical good thing. Like, it seems like you're really choosing the side of the bad when you don't conclude it, when you don't give us your stance on it, you know?
Yeah, I think the most enjoyable thing for me and what gets me going back to these movies is just seeing the incredible performances from these like such amazing actors like Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder, and then it bugs me because I'm like, what am I overlooking or what am I giving into, like, but I'm able to just enjoy like those pieces and what they bring to it. And I love the fact that the movie started with like 12 minutes, 15 minutes in just the office, just Max's office. And I kind of enjoy, it's like as far as like from a filmmaking perspective, I just enjoy that timing. I enjoy the comedic timing of, let's put these two amazing actors in a room together and just like watch them do their thing. And that is what I feel like I get really enjoyable things. And then obviously like the little punch, like little punch jokes, like, yeah, they're funny. Like the hippie band, like when LSD's doing his audition and like the three women are playing the instruments, but there's no saxophone in the song that's playing, but there's a saxophone. You know what I mean? Like
also the song just being about like cyclical capitalism and how everybody sucks. Like, that is what you're trying to say with this movie. This is what you're trying to say. Finish your fucking paragraph.
Yeah, finish the thought. Like, you started it. Come on, tell us.
It's right there. It's right there. Ooh.
I do want to say, like, on my end, the first 15 20 minutes felt like a stage play. Like, very much where you're like, this is it. You're introducing the characters. You're introducing the problem. They are in one room. They're moving around. Literally every space is filled with action and with a choice. And, like, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing, like, the stage play. But I think without, and again, with no baggage, no, like, history with this, I understood what they were doing, but it kind of was a snooze. Like, that first segment was kind of a snoozer for me, just for that reason, where I was like, I loved it when, like, we're seeing The Office. He opens the cabinet. He's like, okay, wait. Hug me, kiss me. Okay, that's her. And then it like cuts to his face and it's like that like 60s cool like montage Austin Powersy close up. And you're like, oh, I'm loving this. Yes. And then she's like sitting on his lap and be like, you're the driver and I'm just whatever. What game are we like? Yes. But then as soon as that whole segment was over and Gene Wilder came into the office, I felt like it like lost so much momentum.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
I do. Now that you've opened the door, here's the first Jay Levy nugget that I thought was funny about this.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
The sex game that they're playing is the chauffeur named Rudolfo. She calls him Rudolfo. When he gets the money and he buys his car, he says, thank you, Rudolfo. His chauffeur is actually named Rudolfo. Just a little. And so, like, I don't know. I like the little callbacks. I like little things. But that's where my brain goes to, is I kind of focus on those aspects of it. So, when it's slow, but that's just my style. I found as I've gotten, older, and I start to look more like Gene Wilder, which y'all can see in the Zoom with the curly hair and the like. Just I feel like that's the way that I'm aging currently. Is my I've been really enjoying that sort of very slow pacing, like subtle humor. Like I'm not going for big laughs, and so because it's just such a different pace about what I view as like going on. Oh gosh, I'm not gonna get on the whole like all the world stuff, but when the world is coming so fast and like people are directly acting into phones and all these things, like it's just a lot for me to engage with. It's been so I deleted my social stuff. I have the Instagram that I use it for the music, like because I feel like it's really important to do for music. But even then, like I just have pushed all that away and been revisiting and just enjoying this very slow paced little subtle things because it's just where my brain can process currently. And I don't know if that's why I maybe enjoy this more.
I do want to I want to talk about patriarchy and men and Max and Leo for sure. But first, before, as like a cute little segue, can we talk about how cute that ascot was that he had in prison? Where they didn't learn anything. They're still pulling the same con in prison, enabled by the warden and stuff. Like, okay, whatever. But I really enjoyed that little ascot that matched the striped jumpsuit. I had to bring that up. I don't know why, but I was like,
no,
fuck
I mean
you, but I love this.
it's a cute look, and it also sort of lends some credence to the idea of like the homoeroticism of their friendship.
Thank you.
Because it really, like, again, I forget who said this earlier, but just like they really kind of teetered that line as like you're seeing this friendship develop into something that is like romantic ? Like, are they kind of falling in love with each other through this scheme? Like, especially the Gene Wilder character, where he's like Leo, he's very much just like, oh, I could never do this, and then he like gets a taste of the badness and is like, I want this. And is that like kind of coming out a little bit? But again, nothing's specific and nothing's explicit in that way. But ascots are very gay, and they're in jail in this moment. So there's like sort of an embracing, like, well, what else am I to do? I'm here, so like embrace it. But again, it's never commented on, but it's hinted at.
Also, being a man in patriarchy is being lazy, getting all the money for doing nothing, and having women that are just there, right? Like, all that felt like a big-ass cover-up to me.
Well, because I also wonder if, just in general, just based on how we exist and misogyny and patriarchy in general, because there is a very definitive structure, especially for, like, cis-het men, this idea that, like, you cannot even be platonically intimate with your male friends. Like, it's you can't touch or hug or cry or emote or anything, because then like you're gay. Like, that's the vibe. Like, you can't do anything. So like maybe it's just because me seeing society as it stands now under this sort of misogynistic patriarchy, if because I'm starved for that kind of representation of like platonic male love to some degree without it sort of being pushed into the queer territory. But I think in this case, like, it really was, because again, the language, the gay coding, whatever, but you can't have that without like teetering into queer territory. But at the end of the day, I feel like everything's queer, just in terms of like everything's a spectrum, nothing's finite, nothing's like absolute, everything's constantly changing. And that's the beauty of like being people, is we're learning and growing and changing constantly. In our best version of ourselves, we're going to be better tomorrow than we were today, hopefully, ideally, right?
And it's interesting how like I really enjoyed that scene at the fountain when he's like, I don't know what I'm feeling. Or no, then they're in the lake and they're on the rowboat, right? I don't know what I'm feeling. It's happiness. And it's sort of like you have, at that moment, you're like, okay, is Max bringing out the worst parts of Leo and Leo bringing out good parts in Max? And then they both kind of counter by going the other way. So like, you know, like it's sort of like, oh, they know that their parts of them are changing, so they kind of reverse to another direction to sort of like counteract that. Like, they're constantly characters in flux.
Well, and then like you were saying, like where it's like this, like it's a lot of punching down at queer people and at gay men specifically, right? So when it's the whole movie, they're kind of okay, and they're kind of, you know, they're, like you said, they're meeting each other halfway, and they're just kind of floating above water, right? And they have this facade, and then only when they embrace each other and what they mean to each other do they then get persecuted and locked up, right? Like, only then, when they fully embrace that, are they labeled as bad, and then they go to jail.
Yeah.
I did really enjoy just how fucking over the top Max was with everything. Because, okay, I felt like Gene Wilder was very high this whole time. But anyways, so Max is just fucking over the top, right? You know, and again, going with the queer coding of these characters, fucking over the top. And like he has this like idea of, he kind of lives in like fake elegance, right? And he's just like, everybody does everything for me. I deserve all of this money. It's not cheating. It's charity, right? You know, like, I deserve all of the things. Oh, please, 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 please do this for me. I'm going to take a nap, right? Like, he wants everything with doing the least work and working on other people and seeing everybody beneath him. And like, he, like, through like this act of like self-victimization where he's always like, well, do you know who I used to be? Do you know what I used to be? Right? And he's like, well, I have a cardboard belt now. I have this. And it's like, okay, but like you're literally trying to get everybody else to do everything for you and not actually doing anything. But I loved like when he like some of the moments where he'd get really pissed off and yell. There's one part where he just screams like double, 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 like, you know, like everything that you say, but back at you. Yeah, no, but 100 times more. And I was just like, this is great. And then like when he like throws the clothes, is it him that like throws the clothes in the fridge? Oh no, he does the coffee on the window. He throws the coffee on the window. Oh, I gotta clean this. And then one of the greatest lines, I think, is when he calls the accountant, when he calls Leo a fish-faced enemy of the people. I was just like, oh my God, this is great. That was lovely.
There's those little moments throughout the whole thing, like the fact that
the
like,
wine in the pocket, the wine in the pocket, fucking like was so. I was like, wait, what's happening? Oh, I got this. That was very fun.
The slapsticky elements to it, and it's sort of like I don't know why, but I'm like just watching him rip his belt into pieces. I just and then break down in tears. Like I've been there. I get it.
I do have a question. If this movie took place like today, would they have found this script on Reddit? Like, would they have like, you know, like, like I sometimes I like to think about like what would change or where would they find these people? Like, cause you know,
it would be some racist on Twitter who like links his Squarespace or something where he's like, whatever, like, maybe a tweet went viral or something and it was bad and it was like, wow, fuck this person, like they fucking suck, and then they're like, yes, get that person to write it. They have
the verified blue check mark next to their handle, so you know it's legit. I would be curious too, because it's almost like if you tried to find the worst script, find the worst director, hire the worst people to play the roles, but it becomes this good thing in a way, right? Like it's sort of like, what if you were to try to find the worst thing, if you were trying to put something out that would just be absolutely terrible, if you're trying to exist now with this, it's hard to find or figure out what you would even do it about, because there's so much, people are so it's very divisive, like on albums, things that are divisive.
People get stoked about bad things, you know, intentionally making bad things. So it's like, what is badness?
Would a modern day version of this just be a Room situation? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like it would be this performed like kind of ironically bad, and we know it's bad, but that's why we like it type deal. Mm-hmm. Who knows?
I don't really have a lot to say about the rest of this. I'm going to the next one if y'all are.
I'm honestly excited to talk about the next one.
Same.
Let's do it.
Amidst the cavalcade of monetary romances, Max Bialystock is a schmoozing and smooching his way through New York's 60 over 60 to help fund his next big Broadway smash that may or may not get made. In walks an accountant and general do-gooder Leopold Leo Bloom, who informs Max that his last show cost less than the money invested, and that if he were to hypothetically commit the same act of fraudulence on a much larger scale, they could be millionaires faster than a 15-minute intermission. The plan is set. They'll find the worst show in history to be produced by the worst director in town, as they promise investors it'll be the smash hit of the season. And when it inevitably fails, they'll fly to Rio. What's the worst show in history, you might ask? How about a problematic pro-Nazi propaganda piece that deifies Adolf Hitler? Yikes.
Who's the worst director in town? No one other than Roger Debris, the town-renowned failure whose, big air quotes, sassy and fruitful direction is as lousy as his limp wrists. They hire the actors, stage the play, and hire a sex object, Swedish assistant, and it's opening night. Just as the audience's appalled thresholds are reached, a big ol' air quotes, eccentric and peculiar Adolf Hitler steps onto the stage and has the audience in stitches. The play is a hit. Now, since they can't pay back the 1,000% investment to the shareholders, it's off to jail they go. They stage a musical with the inmates at the state penitentiary and hatch an equally lascivious scheme with the prisoners. But at the end of the day, that's showbiz, baby. And this time it's a musical.
It's a musical.
The songs. Oh, all right. Yeah, I got lots of things.
I want to just start. Nathan Lane. literally, like, all of my good positive notes are just like anything he's done. Yes, the whole like hold me, touch me, pinch me, lick me, suck me, and then he like grabs his thing. Amazing, love it. The slapstick is perfect. He's literally perfect at everything. Could do no wrong. When they're at the fountain and he's like, he says the line, "Don't you realize there's a lot more to you than there is to you?" And then he looks off camera and mouths the word, "What the fuck?" like he's like, how is he buying this? This is so fake. I'm scheming him. He's a scam. Like, this is all fucking fake. Obsessed. Roger Bart, also, I'm obsessed with Roger Bart. Are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. I could not, like, when he's like, oh, he's having a stroke. Of genius! Like, I just, amazing and fun and whimsy and just, because again, like you said about this one previously, this is camp. This is just like heightened silliness, cartoon buffoonery is all that's displayed in here. And it's done in such a fun way. I mean, I do think, we'll get into it, I do think it doubles down on some of the problematic aspects. But in general, all of these little bits were so fucking fun. Like, the fucking tap number with the walkers. Are you kidding me?
So funny.
That's genius. That's amazing. That's hilarious. Like, that's literally perfect, where he's walking down the street and they're all coming out of the apartment in like a row and they're just following him and he's like, yes, ooh. It's just like, of course. A fucking course. Like, that was so good. Okay. That's what I wanted to say.
It's a great musical. If you're a fan of musicals, you're a fan of theater, it's just really well done. I mean, it won 12 out of the 15 Tonys it was nominated for. It hits a lot of the notes that make some Broadway productions very popular. And I think when the movie came out, the acclaim for the movie, the critique of the movie was that it was just a filming of a theater production and they could have done more. It was very overacted in some moments, but that's what theater is. And that's why, like, when those negative reviews I was reading, I was like, well, they were making a movie of the musical. So I enjoyed the fact that you could see how there were so many elements, and they used so many of the same folks from the original the production on Broadway. Like Susan Stroman directed, and Susan Stroman did the choreography and directed the musical. So like there was being able to see some of the same set pieces, I think, too. And obviously Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick in Gary Beach and Roger Bart were all in that original cast. So getting to see them doing those roles, and I feel like it's more accessible as a film. When Universal makes it as a film, it's way more accessible than being able to go to Broadway to see it with that casting. Or then when you see the tours, it's automatically slightly a little bit different. Like they change certain writings to make more sense for the road, and it's not being able to experience it the same way. But yeah, it's sort of like seeing, especially after rewatching the first one right before it, because I marathoned them, I was like, why there's still some things that never got fixed. Like you had from 67 to 2005 or 2002 when it was produced to still make some changes, and like not making changes on those, but the other things that you did do differently. It's like, what are you saying here?
Well, the choices were very strange. Yeah.
Like, my thing is, they made it more gay, and obviously it was like more okay to be gay or queer in 04, 05, right? Like, in general, obviously, like, still kind of not, but like more so than the 60s, I'd say. So obviously it's like, yes, we're going to make it more gay and bigger and gayer, and yes, but we're still going to make the heightened gayness be sort of the antithesis to literal Nazism. Like, the only thing worse than being a Nazi is being gay. And I mean high femme. I mean the gayest. Gay.
And make the connection with Adolf Hitler's middle name being Elizabeth directly to like Elizabeth. I was like, okay, like we talk about context, we talk about like, you know, like stringing these things together and payoff, and the payoff for that is that gays are as bad as Hitler.
Yes. and that's, I think, I mean, come on, like, make a commentary on it. Like, do it in the same way, like, yeah, bring it up. Like, if there's nothing off topic, sure, yeah. We're talking about Nazis, we're talking about gays, cool. But then it is very much the only reason the gay is there is to make sure that, like, gay Hitler. The only reason that he's worse now and laughable is because he sucks dick. Great. So, like, that's so fun for us. Like, you know what I mean? And it was way more apparent here than it was in the first one. And that was a struggle. Because a lot of this movie I really loved. Like, the comedic timing of it was great. The bits were great. It was just like, even another Nathan Lane bit that I didn't talk about is in the courtroom scene when he's having his lament, when he walks to the window and just opens the door and leaves the courtroom, and they leave it ringing on that little high note in the orchestra, just like keep it going for like maybe 20 seconds, and then he's walked back in at gunpoint. Hilarious. Fucking phenomenal. That's so funny. You know, like, very smart, very good bits were here. But then there's other parts that I was just like, ugh, God. And I get like the whole village people thing, but I'm like, we really don't need like native garb like being expressed as sort of like a gay prop just because of its affiliation to the village people. Like, I get it's 2004, but like, fuck off. Like, come on. Like, we don't need it.
Well, and like, I mean, since you brought that up, like, the only people of color that we see are the shitty boss, who's the certified public asshole, right? Which I laughed very hard at that reframing of CPA. But and he's like trying to grind Leo into the ground by like, you know, like, you've already had your toilet break. Do I smell self-esteem? Right. And then basically the only other people of color that we really see are in the prison at the very end. You know, it's still very fucking white.
Yes. And it was sort of like I guess like in like the jury in the courtroom scene of the first one in 1967 had two people of color, and I believe a woman of color was on there too. This was like gentlemen of the jury, and it's just all white dudes, and you're like, so this part doesn't change, but like you'll expand Ula's character out a little bit. But still, like, women are mainly the punchline. And the one consistent thing between these two is that women, it's definitely women are the punchline. There's not any. But it is interesting to see that.
Oh, absolutely.
You know.
Like, and at least in the other one, like, women are worse off in this one because, like, all of the little old ladies, literally none of them have any agency because they are all dressed the exact same. They have the exact same haircut. They have like, they all have the walker. They're all this one monolith, right? And then most of the other women that we see are, you know, part of like the chorus line, right? And they are all dressed the same and all objectified the same, except for the one redhead who, like, I'm just like, wait, why? What are you trying to say here with this part? Like, I don't get that.
Like, to me, I think just basing it on what Jay was saying earlier about like it being a commentary on the industry, in this fantasy of like him being a producer, it's like the no ugly girls trope.
Yes, and I hate that
for him, which I like. I like that they're like, oh yeah, he's a bad guy, he's scheming, and also this guy who works in the industry and has pull. Even in his imaginations, he's like, you're ugly, get away from me. I don't want to physically have sex with you, so move.
Yes. Okay. Can we talk about how big incel energy Leo has in this movie?
Yes!
Because, okay, he, like, the whole time he's like, they double down on like the OCD or like, you know, anxiety, mental health bullshit, right? So like, okay, fine. At least it's, I mean, it's not just used in that moment. It's kind of strewn throughout the narrative. Okay, whatever. But literally, there's a moment where he talks about how he cut women out of his life because they were taking him in the wrong direction and, like, setting up women as this dangerous, like, temptress, you know. And, like, he also won't get married. He won't fuck without getting married. So, like, at the end, Ula has to marry him in order to get her 11 o'clock sex, right? Which is, like, cute. Okay. But like he's that much of a fucking incel that he like is like he wants money, he wants power, he wants women, but he doesn't want to do the work to get any of them, but he also deserves all of them. Because like he's like, I'm better than everybody, I deserve all of this, I want everything I've seen in the movies, and in the same breath says, I'm a loser, I'm a coward, I can't woo women, I'd have an attack if any woman were after me, you know, but he wants to fuck all of the women on the chorus line, you know. So I'm just like, to me, I was just like, big incel energy over here.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Especially in that number, that musical number, when it's supposed to be like a cute like romance between him and Uma Thurman there, and that. And then it builds and builds and builds, and then some of the lines in that were like super problematic as I'm listening to it, like just like you said, And then I also thought like the little icing on the cake of that one, which is like, oh, was that as soon as like they start kissing, it just pans down and his little blue blanket that he needed, right, is in the trash. Like, oh, I have her now. And so now it's gone. And it's like that prop of like, okay, women are the prop, or like the sort, you know what I mean? It's
literal objectification.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
she is now my object. I don't need this object anymore. And it's sentiment. I need her, or rather this thing, not a person, and its sentiment.
Well, and also like you know, it's worth noting too that the blue blanket, it was blue. They make a point to say the blue blanket like a hella times, right? And then every woman in this movie is like, except for when they're not wearing anything and they're just wearing the pearls, right? But they all wear blue. The old ladies, their outfit is blue, because they are their safety net and the comfort for Max, right? The same thing with Uma Thurman. Uma Thurman in that specific scene, right? She's wearing blue, and even using that color to further the objectification of not just Ula, but all women in this, right? You know, my safety blanket is blue. I don't need this anymore because I have a woman.
And the lighting cue, right when that song starts in that white office, goes blue. The blue lights, which I was like thinking is beautiful, but then at the same time, I'm like, I just now realized sort of like all the connections pieces to this. Like, yeah, that is. I didn't get that this one. I didn't get that through the watching of it, but it doesn't make me feel any better about how women were portrayed, because it's sort of and like we talked about before, right? You where do you leave space for people to not, like, you say something to a point, but where do you leave that space? Sort of like you didn't just do the thing where like Max is like, I have money, I'm gonna go buy a toy, and then bring Ula in. You kind of present, you give her a bit of a backstory, you give her a lot more depth of character, you kind of understand her, learn a little bit more about her, but then at the end of the day, she is still just the object. So it's like we did a little bit more here, you know, we did a little bit better.
Oh yeah,
it's like, but, oh well, she wants to be objectified, right? Like her whole song and dance is, oh god, what is it? It's like, if you got it, flaunt it. So like, cool, I'm on board for that. If this is what you want, great. But like, literally, that song is just there to make us feel better about her objectification, you know. And then also to make her more desirable, they have that cute line about like, audiences really love a G-string, right? And I'm like, okay, fine. And then like they have her talk about her schedule, and there's like the double entendre of, you should come at 11, you know, that's when Ula likes to have sex. And I'm like, okay, we get it. We fucking get it, you know.
Well, interesting nugget too. Like, here's the second little nugget. In the first one, when Max is cleaning the window, he shouts, if you got it, flaunt it. But he's shouting it at the white car, not the woman coming out of it. And then in this one, it's in order to have that sort of connection to Ula, literally, like Nathan Lane is shouting it at Ula directly, and he's not even behind the window. He's outside on the balcony and waits for the same car to pull up. And then when she walks out, so it's almost like it's more directed. So it's sort of like, did this get a little bit more problematic? Or like,
yes,
you know what I mean? But then the other thing about that song, and I don't know if this is like me knowing more about Mel Brooks' humor, and then the only other Mel Brooks musical that I had seen before this one would have to have been Robin Hood Men in Tights. And sort of like understanding his songwriting, right? It's almost like as a character is when you got it, flaunt it, Ula explaining to us that she knows what all of it is. She knows the industry and understands it and gets it. And so she's explaining it like, I'm just playing the game. I'm just playing the game to succeed.
But then
and
she leaves at the end. Right? But then she's like, oh, fuck all this. And she has that thing like, well, we could take the $2 million and go, right? So, okay, like, cool. She has like these little nuggets of agency, but then at the same time, like, if she wanted to be a star, this doesn't align with her goals, right? And this also, like, it didn't really, for me, I feel like they didn't know what her motivation was. It was just going to be what was presented and what was in front of her, you know? And I feel like a lot of her character was written so we felt better about her objectification. I do really like Uma Thurman, and I think that she did a great job in this role. I had a lot of fun with this movie in general, but I feel like everything was just written to be like, yeah, it's okay. Like, she's cool.
For me, talking about camp and I want to talk about, like, I kind of want to talk about queerness, and I want to talk kind of about, like, that sort of the element of this and where it was the lines like the over the top and the elements of it that were fun and like really interesting, like again of the Broadway sort of style, but like I don't know, I'm just really kind of curious about that intersection.
I think the big thing for me, like with this version of it in particular, is sort of like the whiteness of it in general, and sort of the level of like, sure you're queer, sure you're gay, but your whiteness is sort of the most present aspect of this, and kind of commenting on the industry itself, like who is Broadway for, who has access to Broadway? White people, oftentimes fairly affluent white people, because it's not cheap, and traveling to New York is not cheap, right? I mean, it's the same, and I don't know if we have to get into this, but it's the same problems I had with Hamilton, which is, again, yes, it's a celebration of like people of color, but at the end of the day, the story is of a white person and of a white history being presented to white people through the lens of like, this is progressive because they're black actors. And it's like, well, these aren't black stories. They're white stories for white people. So we're kind of just tokenizing, again, in this very same way, like Broadway does time and time again, decade after decade after decade. And I think in The Producers, it's very similar, just in its disregard for sort of commenting or acknowledging that kind of privilege in this way, where it's like, well, I'm gay, so it can't be bad. Like, yes, camp, heighten, gay, get it. I love, but in the same turn, it is the like femming of Adolf Hitler. Great. Like, it can be this bad thing. And even when they have that like fantastic song where it's like, I'm this person and I'm this person, it's Debris, they're in the house and he's wearing the dress, and it's like that whole thing. And again, the Village People stuff, like there is a complete disregard for like what is acceptable, because like, oh, we're queer and gay and we can just be playful. But it's like, sure, embrace the silliness, but at the same time, your silliness doesn't preclude you from being trash or from being problematic or racist. And I think that that's just like this movie is really emblematic of that, not only because it is just like the whitest fucking movie.
It is so white.
But in that same way where it is like, and again, is this commenting on the whiteness of Broadway and the whiteness of the stage and New York showmanship in that way, whether it's play, whether it's musical, like, is this a commentary on that problem? I don't think so. Like, I think that this is just a product of it, not a commentary on it.
100%. And it's sort of, again, like the same thing we talked about, which was like so annoying with the first one at moments, was like, you're like, there's the water. We see the thing, but you're just gonna leave it there and let you make up your own parts of it. Or you can't tell if it's included. Like, are we bringing it up because we are trying to make a commentary? Like the sort of like the lack of representation of people of color. It's almost like by the time I was starting to really realize it during the movie was during the Keep It Gay scene. And then it's almost like all of a sudden the Village People thing, which is like the reference to Village People and like that silliness. Oh, well, we're here. This is us. Like, but you're like, but is that good? Or
yeah,
no?
Exactly. Like, it was a problem then, it's a problem now. Just because you like bring it back in a way that's like referential to like an early gay thing doesn't mean it doesn't have its problems, or that it's offensive or just messy. Like just bringing it, it's like, well, or actually talking about this history, it's like, yeah, but that history was once a present, and in that present, that thing was problematic. So you're bringing those elements with you. You're not expunging yourself of that just because you're gay. And again, it has everything to do with like intersectional feminism in that way, or intersectionality at large, where it's like you can be these things and still be bad. Like
the misogyny there too. Like,
yes,
that Shirley Markowitz was the joke. The woman was the punchline of that scene because she was plain, or like what they were coding her. And so you're sort of like, I don't know,
because
like
well, in sort of queer misogyny in general, like, again, it's okay for these men to be high femme and like performative and silly and just femme in general. But as soon as like this assumedly cis woman presents masculine, then it's funny, then it's a joke, then it's the bottom of the barrel, because at the end of the day, who has the power? Men do. No matter. I mean, but I mean, again, in this queer space, even the high femme men have the power, and they're the ones punching down at women. Like, that's gonna just be the case under patriarchy, even if it is a queer patriarchy, you know?
Yeah, though that
Yeah.
seemed to give us like one of my other like little moments, like favorite lines. Roger Bart, it's like, "Can I take your hats, your coats, and your swastikas?"
Oh my God,
Then you're
yes.
like, oh boy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could not even believe that these men had like at least in the first one they like took them off, right? But in this one they're just so horny for money that they like don't even realize what they're promoting. And after like that whole fucking 15 minutes dedicated to the Nazi song and then the oath and all that, I was just like, did we need all of that? And did we need Pigeon Hitler? Like, is that something that we really needed,
and There is a level of, and I understand, again, it is like a history that you're trying to like add levity to because of the darkness that is there, adding levity to it to brighten it a little bit, to be like, yes, this was bad, but we still need to laugh, like that being sort of the driving force within this. At what point is it less of like making a fun moment or like making something a little bit lighter, and then at what point are you kind of like codifying or like codifying goodness in this way where it's like, oh, they're just so funny and silly, and you're stripping so much badness away that there's kind of like a forgotten, you're implying so much goodness and silliness in these bad characters that you're kind of like implying that they are good. Like, what is the line there?
Oh yeah, it's weird. Almost like you're by the end of the scene, the beginning of this, like you forget that Franz was like most definitely a big a lead Nazi, like a leader in the Nazi like party that had this connection with these folks. But you couldn't forget that by the end. Also, third little nugget: the pigeons were all created by the Jim Henson Creature Shop.
Oh, gorgeous!
As little puppets,
of course. I love that.
They partnered with it because it was New York based. They filmed all of it in New York, right? And like, I also thought, like, before I forget, because I sat and watched their credits, they had to thank and reference that the Village People was owned by the Village People, even though they never said the Village People once. Just by they literally used that brand like that so perfectly that they had to put it in the credits that Village People is owned by Village People. And and you're like, it's very interesting. It's like, why did you?
It's absolute likeness for sure. Like, there's no mistaking. And even now, they didn't say it, but we're talking about it. Like, that was obviously a reference.
That they thought they had to pay those people like to allow to use that likeness for the bit that it's almost like it goes back to that decision making of like, where did did it have to go this, like, I don't know, it could have, they had so much time to reimagine this. And in some ways, like, they did do a better job to a point, but it's just like at the end of the day, were they just relying on the cheap laugh, the easy laugh? I mean, the slapstick, like, I will say, I love watching Matthew Broderick get hit in the face by Will Ferrell, and like he did a full-on flip and like landed. That was like, I was like, man, all right,
fantastic,
he still got it. It was beautiful. I think it's sort of like it's right in the middle of this whole. I don't know. They're about to play. I don't know. It's very. I feel mixed about it.
This movie does, and this is kind of like some of the issue I have with comedy centered around like incredibly problematic ideologies. Is that sure you're laughing at Nazis, like that's a thing, right? But like in the same time, you're still centering them in this narrative, and you're removing like some of the context as to what they did and the horrific like acts that they did. And to me, that's in poor taste, because like now, like, sure, everybody's laughing at Nazis, but now it's a joke, and now we have so many people in America that don't think it's real, what happened in the Holocaust and everything. So to me, that is incredibly irresponsible. And in this film and in this context now, and then it becomes a myth, right? And then it becomes now, sure, like Nazis are part of pop culture, and they're such a staple in pop culture that, like there's Nazi mode on like Call of Duty where you like, go and you like kill a bunch of Nazis or whatever, like great. And there's like whole giant video games built around this idea of kill the Nazis, without these people that are like people that are consuming them realizing that they are also racist, or things like that. But not being able to like have contextualization for this is what this is, And so in this film, like now everybody's cheering for Nazis. And that's part of why I didn't watch Jojo Rabbit yet, right? Because Jojo Rabbit, and I understand that that it was done well from what I hear. So I might give it, but like I do have a really hard time when it comes to that kind of subject matter because now the symbols and the people and the whole context for everything surrounding the Nazis is now just laughable, and it is. To me, that's really, really, really horrifying.
It got boiled down to on the stage too, like, okay, yeah, this is about Nazis, but look at these showgirls with pretzel pasties and a large sausage, which from a like sort of over the top musical, like I enjoyed the costumes and I enjoyed all of that, and I thought it was so funny. But you're right, it does sort of like it kind of washes over or doesn't contextualize who those people are that are now, I don't know. Is there, and like all that imagery at the same time partnered with like beautiful, like amazing dance, like, and choreography to be able to pull off some of those things. But at the same time, as all that time was dedicated to having them create a Nazi or the swastika moving at time. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of, it's a lot of time and energy into those things.
Yeah. Any sort of level of this really just does nullify the history. And nullifying that history is detrimental just moving forward because, again, you have people who don't necessarily even believe it happened when it is well documented and it is very, very, very recent history, But even in that same turn, like, again, what is that line? And again, especially as somebody who is not Jewish, I think in this context, critiquing it, yes, just for the fact that it does sort of, it kind of sanitizes it a little bit. It sanitizes that history. But, like, again, I understand adding levity to something, but where is that line where it's like now you're making this a good thing instead of the bad thing that we know historically, intrinsically, at its foundation is so very, very bad. By adding this levity, are you making it less bad?
And does that story need to be told? Like I found myself like with this, it's like that's the thing that was chosen, know, and they made it an even larger production in this one, right? So I get excited about remakes and stuff because there are choices that can be made, and a lot of the time the choices that are made are not aren't really well thought out. And so in this one, the first film is 1 hour and 30 minutes. This one is 2 hours and 15 minutes. So we got 45 extra minutes of more Nazis. Basically, we got more Nazis and more gay people, but it was just like you said, it's still that that misogynistic view of that. So those things were very hard for me to overlook.
And there's a lot of questions because you're like, okay, so yeah, I feel a little bit weird about all this Nazi imagery and like sort of what that's saying, but I'm also remembering this is made by Mel Brooks, who, you know what I mean, made by a Jewish director or Jewish writer, and like all, and so you're like, what is it? It's the scope is very limiting, and it's almost like it's just very much so. It's, I don't know how to explain it.
And I understand that like humor can be a way to deal with something traumatic, and things like that. But yeah, I think you're right. I just don't know where and I am not a Jewish person, so I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, and that's the thing. I don't know either, and it's sort of it's hard because I as much as I appreciate, and one of the things I love about comedy, and not necessarily in film, but sometimes it's shown in that way if it's done right. But a lot of stand-up comedy is that idea of using those things and using taking trauma and how you work through those, how it's something, it can be done really well. It can also be done very poorly. And the folks who end up doing it's all about who's doing the joking. So with Mel Brooks, it's sort of I don't know, it's tough. I appreciate so much about his writing, and some of the movies and films he's done, where, giving a lot of voices to the amount of Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder that we have together, in these amazing characters and these really funny, very funny and enjoyable duos. But it's just, I don't know. It's well, at the end of the day, the laugh, why am I laughing? Is it really, I wish it was saying something. And the comedy, I think, that deals with those things, that heavier topics, they're also saying something where it has more commentary, whereas Mel Brooks is just kind of presenting it.
It boils down to intent, right? So in this case, the intent with this, or Springtime for Hitler as an idea, was to be shocking. And like in the story, it's to be shocking. It's like what's going to shock the audience to the point where they don't want to see this thing anymore. So not only in the world is it supposed to be shocking, but as a viewer watching this thing in that world, we're supposed to be like, oh shit, like they're really like doing this. That's crazy. So the intent, base level, apart from anything else, is to be shocking. So the intent isn't really even great in this. It's just to be, again, kind of like we're just going to do it because we can. Boom. Whereas other like sort of stand-up comedy, when they are dealing with trauma and sort of working through that as a means to humor, it's more careful, it's more impactful because it's careful, because it's very clearly like this is a really bad thing. However, XYZ punchline, now it's fun, the thing still exists, but we have a moment of levity, we move on to the next joke. Whereas in this one, it really is just, oh, Nazis. Okay.
Well,
like,
and then,
oh, that's
like,
it.
big level too, it's just like Max and Leo are profiting off of Nazi ideology.
Yes.
And profiting off of the reframing of Nazism, right? And in these ways, we just talked about like how like you can reframing domestic abuse through like, you know, Disney films, or reframing these things is not necessarily something. It's, to me, when you do it on a scale and in something like this, like to me, it feels more irresponsible, you know?
Yeah.
And again, like pulling back and like seeing the meta thing, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. These two people are going to profit off of this ideology. This is bad. This is awful. But like, you know, this is what happens. And also this is, this feels icky, you know? So like, but this is what happens, you know?
Yeah. And this time too, like with the one thing that I did this one worse in some ways or more problematic, is that in the first one, Max and Leo are still in jail at the end. They're just doing this play in jail. But this one, they're pardoned, they're out, and so they made more heroes. I would have loved it if they were still the sort of anti-heroes. Like they still aren't bad. These are still kind of like bad people who, you know, use this and they end up staying in jail. That's funnier to me than like it just going to happy ending, though I know it's Broadway, and like that's sort of, you know, I don't know.
No, it 100%, because it makes their badness acceptable, and on top of making their badness acceptable, they're now profiting from that experience. So that experience itself, because it is like Prisoners in Love or whatever. Like now it's just a musical about jail, and again, profiting off of like legalized slavery. Cool. Another really fun thing to be capitalists of, I guess. And again, what is that?
Yeah. And the only people of color in the whole movie pretty much appear in the dance sequence when they're doing the show in jail. Yes. So it's sort of like, why? Why were these decisions made? Yeah. Like, why? Are you presenting it this way? Are you saying it this way for a reason? And why? Or were you that like not aware or unaware that but like the fact that they got worse, it makes me feel like it was more of a direct decision. But I don't know. This is the thing about loving things, you know?
Yeah, and like, because like these men in this film are seen as the anti-heroes, and especially this is shot from the male gaze for very specific reasons as to this is how, you know, how they view women, but also from the male gaze because men are supposed to project themselves onto these two characters. You know, they want power, they want money, they want women, and they want the easiest, laziest way to do it, right? And so these people are just kind of like held up as like, hell yeah, fucking they got it in the end. See, everything works out, you know? And Leo, he sought out Max, right? Like he in the first one, he didn't really know anything about him or about whatever, right? But like Leo knew about Max and knew what he was and was like, you're great. I want this. I want to do this, you know? And like in that way, like in the first one too, like he kind of like teaches him how to leverage his maleness to his advantage, right? But in this one, it's more of like, I want to be a producer. I love you and your work. Take me under your wing. Teach me how to do this. And to me, that felt like, you know, again, more big incel energy, but it felt more gross and more disgusting in a lot of ways. And then later on to be like, oh, well, I was an honest man before you. And he like blames everything on Max when he's the one that kind of like sought out that lifestyle and made that change, you know, so like not able to take responsibility for or accountability for his own actions. To me, it was even grosser because of all of those things. But then I'm like, oh, is this supposed to be a commentary on how the audience is supposed to see themselves. I don't know. But then they win in the end, so it doesn't fucking matter because they get pardoned and they're out of jail.
Yeah.
I think the reason that they had Leo end up with Ula in the same way and like actually get away with the money, and you know that he had sex and stuff, right? They're very overt about that, and I think that is because of the male gaze in this. I think it is because they want people to identify with Max and to then also be like, no, you know what? I'm good. I'm not going to leave my buddy. He had everything that he wanted, but he's still there for his bro, you know, like,
yeah.
So when you look at Leo as the everyman, to me, those kind of choices make more sense. And that's because they're trying to appeal to young men, or they're trying to appeal to those male fantasies. Like literally everything about Leo is a male fantasy, quitting your day job to go and pursue your dream of having power, women, and money, and then taking all the money and fucking bolting and having a lot of sex somewhere, and then coming, like, I mean, just everything about him is just a gross incel boy, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go to the
Okay.
outro. We did it. We produced. We've productive
an episode on the producers.
Yes, we did.
And here we are. Let's talk about it. Final thoughts. So, 1967. Eric, who was this for?
I mean, I think my answer is going to be the same for both men, white men in general. Yeah, it's really like, it's so hard. I say that so many times, like cishet white men, largely is just who this movie was for. I mean, the justification is in the episode, as we said, but yes, cishet white men, 100%. Who did you think this was for?
Oh, 100% cis white men. Like, I don't think, I can't even come up with something that is like witty or funny, which I usually can't do because I'm not very good at doing that. Like, I'm not very quick on my humor. But yeah, no, it is 100% for dudes, y'all. Like, looking at a bunch of media, I'm just like, internalized everything. This is where it comes from.
Oh yeah.
This normalizes all of this bullshit. Fuck the patriarchy. Yeah. Anyways. What about you, Jay? Who do you think this is for?
As a Jewish queer feminist, I can definitely say this is for cishet white people, and especially white men. And it's sort of where it resonates for me. It's like, it's making me again remember and realize and understand like the importance of unpacking and being aware of your privilege and where that is. Like, you know, and because I think like it can be easy to say, well, you know, as a Jewish person, you know, he could talk about all these things, but no, like you have to be aware of those things and where those things intersect, like where your identities intersect. Like it's still possible, like you said earlier, Eric, it's like it's possible to be like gay or a queer person and like be trash in some ways too. So I rambled. It's for white men, even though I like, yeah.
100%. Eric, did you like it?
I did not. I wanted to, like, going into it is definitely one of those, like, I feel like I feel like I should have seen these and like I wanted to like them. I did not like it. Did you like it?
I did not like it, and I also wanted to say that I did because you know, I grew up watching some Mel Brooks. I love Gene Wilder, but I needed the essay, not the outline. I needed the final version, not the rough draft.
Yes.
You know? What do you think, Jay? Do you like it?
I like the elements of it, and it makes me wish, like what I wish would happen is, and I have found this with so many people, like whether it's family or people that I look up to or artists or, you know, actors or all those things, is like I wish like they had opened up their mind. Like I want to see the actual queer like retelling of these stories, like because there were so many opportunities for there to be humor in these things, and there were so many great performances, but I still like those elements of it. But overall, like it's definitely in one of the movies, and I'm going to continue to say like, hey, I enjoyed it while I enjoyed it, but it's it comes with those disclaimers, like, you know what I mean? The art that comes with disclaimers, like, it's not, I understand that it's problematic. It's problematic as fuck. There's still elements that I enjoyed. I will say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super valid. What about 2005 version? Eric, was this new, interesting, or the same? Progressive, regressive? How has the story evolved with today's ideals?
I will say it was new and interesting just in the fact that it was like a genre shift just for it being a musical. The same, obviously, just with its story. I think just base level, it was regressive, which is surprising because I'm just surprised by that. Like, I honestly didn't think it would be as regressive as it was, or doubling down on these sort of problematic aspects. I think it really is just kind of like it stuck where it was and just made it a little bit sillier, I'd say. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it was a mess. What about you? How do you feel?
I feel like it was newer. I feel like that 45 minutes that they added, at first I was dreading, but like it really did just set up a lot of context that was missing previously, or, you know, just allowed, because there are some parts that were so fucking funny with, like, you know,
Yes.
throwing the stuff in the freezer, you know, like, or throwing the clothes in the fridge, doing this. Like, I like that there was a little bit more room for those moments to breathe. So for me, that was cool. And so it was more interesting visually, I think. I like that it felt like a Broadway production, like it felt like theater, and that's the theater kid in me, loving to see that. But overall, I feel like it was just it was really regressive. I feel like a lot of the things, a lot of that 45 minutes that was added was just doubling down on problematic issues from the first one, or creating entirely new context for things that didn't necessarily need context. I have a really big problem with the reframing of Leo as, rather than just kind of like a dude that was just came up off the street and was like, oh, okay, I guess, to him being an incel that kind of idolized Max. Yeah, I feel like it has not aged well. What do you think, Jay?
I think it definitely regressed in many ways, like, especially that in ways that I didn't notice until I started looking at it with that critical eye. But also, I think, like, it's hard because, like, where there was room in the first one for you to, like, where they didn't say it, so it made you think, you had to go with, like, well, what's your intent with this joke, or what am I supposed to be laughing at here? This one, I feel like, used that extra time to give you a funny image, or show you this is the Joker, this is what it is, and it's always like, okay, well, I get it now. It's funny, but in some moments it can be funny, but you are doubling down on some of those tropes, or some of, like, the very basic punchline stuff like that. You know, I don't know. I just want I want someone to do it again. I know they don't do things 3 times, but, like, if you had somebody who was,
they do.
They do.
They do.
God.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. There's like 3 A Star Is Born. There's like 5 Wizard of Oz's.
3 Mummies.
Mummies.
They love to remake shit. So, like,
just give it time. They're gonna come back. They're gonna circle back in like 25 years for sure.
Yeah,
Turn
and
the
hopefully
musical into a non-musical. That's what I want to see. Someone turn this now go the other way and look at it through with an intersectional lens, like an intersectional lens, and make it for the time and give it representation. Like put accurate representation, or not, like, don't just go to, you know, tropes of people, like, and see what you can do with it. I mean, I do think, like,
it's possible.
Plot, it's funny. There's the plot, or the idea. It can be humorous, but take some, like, can you do it without the problematic aspects? Then, if you can't do it without the problematic aspects of it, if you can't do it without Nazi imagery and misogyny and queer-coded characters that are just the butt of the joke, then it's maybe not funny anymore. You know, maybe it's not going to work.
Then maybe it doesn't need to be remade.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Who do you think it was for?
Again, same answer. Cishet white men. Need I say more? Jess, who do you think it was for?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Cishet white men, and also people that left Broadway. Love the theater.
That's true.
Love it. Yeah. Jay?
It's for Broadway. It's for Broadway. It is like the production, like all those elements. That's what it is. And the great thing about the theater is you can just put it on the stage, but you're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to engage with it. You just sit there and have it. Like, because the minute we started dissecting this, you start to see all those issues and all those problems. So it was a great movie, or a great musical. It was
Great musical. Yes.
Great movie musical.
Yeah, it was for people. You like musicals.
Did you like it, Eric?
No. Well, okay, you know what? I'm going to take that back. I liked Nathan Lane and Roger Bart, point blank period, end of story, forever and ever, amen. I think that they're perfect. Almost anything that they've ever done, for the most part, I am absolutely about. The rest of it, I could take it or leave it. As a general, I think there was better aspects to it, but overall, did I like it? No. Did you?
I like parts of it, and parts of it are very fun to me. Also, yes, Nathan Lane. Oh my God. But yeah, I don't think I liked it, especially after like really thinking about the glorification of Nazis, and even at like, you know, a humorous expense. Like to me, that's always just a little bit hard. And I'm finding that, like, especially right now with what's happening with Palestine and everything, I'm just like, I don't know if I need to watch media that glorifies or even like humorizes violence against Jewish people. So I don't know. Parts of it were incredibly fun, but I'm not sure. Yeah, probably not. No. Jacob.
I like it if I turned off all the critical pieces of my brain. I enjoy it. Like, I enjoyed the watching of it. I enjoy singing the songs. But I recognize that when I engage with it on a critical level, that I understand that it's problematic, and I understand that there's things that can be better. And I wish it was better. I like it, but I wish it was better. I really do. You know, but I saw this movie on opening night at the theater. I saw it on stage. I've watched it 1,000 times, and it's hard to, like, there's pieces of it that I won't be able to let go of that I've always enjoyed about it. But I'm not going to excuse the fact that it's problematic.
Yeah.
Hollywood, stop making problematic shit so we can just like it, okay? Thanks.
Yeah, please.
I hate having these little caveats of, well, I liked parts of it, but like this parts was messy. But like, I don't know. Can I say if I hate that? Hate it.
Yeah.
All right. So we just did the thing. Thank you so much, Jay, for being on. We forgot to mention at the beginning of the episode, but we are in a band together, Jay Levy and we released a tape recently, so you can check that out at our Bandcamp. Anything else you want to say, Jay?
No, thank you for having me. Thanks for watching. Thank you for having me on. I have enjoyed the conversations, and I look forward to continuing them and continuing to hear y'all's perspective. And like, it's just been exciting. I just want to talk to y'all forever. But I really love Danny too much for that. So I'm you know what I mean? We don't need to give him more to edit. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thank you so much for doing this. We love and appreciate you. And thank you, listeners. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked it, please rate and review. Follow us on social media, all the things.
Also, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/NOTstalgia. You can subscribe for as little as $3. We're retooling it a little bit now, so you'll have access to our NOTstalgia show, which is our every other week Patreon only, Patreon exclusive show. So check that out. If you love it, sign up. You'll love it. You'll love more of it.
Our artwork and music is by Eric Lefebvre. Editing is by Danny Barkley. And thanks again for listening. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jess.
And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical. Bye-bye. This podcast has been brought to you by the NOTstalgia Network.
Visit the NOTstalgiaNetwork.com for more.
You enter the dungeon and see the evil wizard pointing his wand directly at you. He says, "Show me a funny and delightful actual play Dungeons & Dragons podcast, or I'll consume your souls!" What do?
I take out my phone and find Quest Friends Forever on Spotify.
I show him how to find Quest Friends Forever on Apple Podcasts.
I share the Quest Friends Forever Instagram and YouTube pages with him.
And you all get critical hits!
Yay!
Quest Friends Forever is an actual play podcast starring 4 friends with varying levels of Dungeons & Dragons experience. Join us for new episodes every other Wednesday as we embark on fantasy adventures, play fast and loose with the rules, and laugh at each other's shenanigans. No prior D&D knowledge is required to listen, so everyone can feel free to join the fun. Quest Friends 4, that's the number 4, like how there's 4 of us, ever. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Quest Friends Forever.